That was very, very inspiring, John Taylor. Very, very inspiring. I want to bring to the podium former chairman of the board to make a special presentation, Bethany Sanchez. Bethany.
Thank you, Bob. Wow. So it takes a village. You know, this movement has a lot of different people in it, a lot of different voices. Not all of us can be as inspiring with our oratory as Reverend Barber or Reverend Dickerson, or as moving with our stories and our passion as John Taylor. But we all have the gifts that we bring. And tonight it's my role to bring to you a remembrance, a sweet and tender remembrance. In September, our movement lost Clifford Schrupp, a great man and an important leader in economic justice. He was our friend, our colleague, life partner to NCRC board member Mary Ellen Lewis, and an inspiration to us all. At the time of Cliff's death, my boss wrote the following remarks. My boss is Bill Tisdale, from the CEO of the Metropolitan Milwaukee Fair Housing Council. In September, the fair housing movement lost a pioneer, a visionary, when Clifford Schrupp, the founding director of the Fair Housing Center of the Metropolitan Detroit, died of cancer. Cliff began his work with the Fair Housing Center in 1977 and continued to lead the organization until earlier last year, when his illness forced him to step down. I was privileged to know and work with Cliff for over 30 years. He was a person of rare generosity of spirit, integrity, and perseverance. And we're so fortunate that he devoted his considerate skills to the promotion of civil rights for all. And as his colleagues at the Fair Housing Center of Metropolitan Detroit note, Cliff supervised the investigation of over 6,000 complaints resulting in fair housing. I'm sorry. Cliff supervised the investigation over 6,000 complaints of unlawful housing discrimination, with over 400 of those complaints resulting in fair housing litigation in state or federal courts. His work resulted in $11 million in financial settlements and awards from defendants, and opened doors for people who had had their rights illegally denied. While his work in Michigan kept him busy, to be sure, Cliff was always ready to share his time and expertise with colleagues from across the nation. He did so with grace and humility, and it was an honor to know him. We know Cliff's legacy will endure. Tonight we have a short video to share of Cliff.
When people have been lied to, have been given false information because of their race, their religion, or one of the characteristics, that's a damage. That's a real damage emotionally for them, as well as a damage to our society.
I have never, ever heard anyone speak so candidly about injustice.
I don't think you could find somebody who better reflects the concept of diversity and inclusion. That's really what Cliff was all about.
Cliff is just a very, very smart man on the issue of fair housing. I don't think there's anybody in Detroit and Michigan, maybe in the country, that knows more than him. But beyond that, he's a person who just cares tremendously for people.
He had this amazing way of making people feel included and needed and important.
Here you had a gentleman who saw those riots and didn't flee. Cliff Schrupp recognized that part of his calling was to stay here and do everything that he could to make sure that the community and the neighborhoods were restored.
He did it because it was the right thing to do. And that was what was really important to Cliff.
He was so intent upon making sure that he looked out for what mattered. And in his mind, I think that meant restoring a vibrant community where truly, Martin Luther King's thoughts could be sort of fulfilled, having a dream that we could all live together in peace and harmony.
He was unflinching. I think that many of these issues around civil rights are around courage. You have to confront power. Often what happens with regard to discrimination is that it is at times the government, it is at times people who are well-resourced, and you have to be ready to stand up to them.
Cliff's, theory was you need to find a purpose in your life that you recognize as an important one. And while there were a lot of facets of institutionalized racism in this country, you couldn't battle them all and be effective. So you had to choose one that was dear to your heart and that had a significant impact on people, and he chose housing.
He was on the battlefield. He recognized it, and he was a warrior without any actual weaponry, but his weaponry was the Fair Housing Center.
What is so important about the Fair Housing Center is that it stood for fair housing, but it impacted fair housing by doing what is called testing. And so that if there was a complaint that a landlord was discriminating, they ran a program for many, many years where they would send out testers, a white person trying to obtain housing, and then compare that to the results if a black person or any other protected group.
Cliff took this testing and fair housing litigation concept that we were working on and said, I think this is where there's a real need. He worked in developing a program for training fair housing testers. And what's really significant is that there is a number of federal court case decisions that recognize the value of objective fair housing testers, and specifically pointing out the Fair Housing Center of Metropolitan Detroit as a model. And I think that was due to Cliff Schrupp.
Cliff's going to be missed for many reasons, for all that he has contributed, for the kind of person he was. He was a fighter, but then he also had an ease to him, almost a gentility that was a perfect balance to the fact that he fought for these important issues.
The legacy of Clifford Schrupp is going to last for a long time. And the best way to honor that legacy, I think, is to follow his sort of mantra, which is, the true joy in life is being used for a purpose that you recognize as a mighty one. And Cliff recognized that racial justice issues was a mighty purpose.
We have lost a great man, but through his children, both of whom are as dedicated, I believe that he instilled within them great vision. And I want to very quickly just thank them for sharing him with us, because often the families have to take second fiddle when people are as powerful. And so we've lost someone, but I'm hoping that those of us that are, intent upon trying to make an impression, trying to make a statement, trying to right wrongs, I'm hoping that he instilled within us that, shall we say, continuity of spirit.
We need to remember how racially unfair this country has been and continues to be. We're not going to correct those situations unless we are honest about our history and about where we are currently.
On behalf of the NCRC board and staff, we're proud to dedicate this year's NCRC annual conference to Clifford Schrupp's memory. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. We're coming to a close. I know that you're concerned about that. But I want to do two things. First of all, I want to recognize John's wife, Susan. Susan, would you stand up and let's please give her a big round of applause. I would also like for all of the members of the NCRC Board of Directors to please stand, and let's give these great individuals a round of applause, including our Director Emeritus, Lee Bolak. Lee, thank you so much. Thank you. Several of our board members are leaving the board, and I'd like to take a moment to recognize the outgoing members of the NCRC board who are in the audience tonight. Both of them have made outstanding contributions to the field of economic justice, and we thank them for their service to the NCRC Board of Directors. I'd like to invite to the stage Nadine Cohen, Managing Attorney of the Consumer Rights Division of the Greater Boston Legal Services and NCRC Board member since 2008. And next, I'd like to invite up Ted Wysocki, President and CEO of Lead Counsel, North Branch Work, past NCRC Board Chair and NCRC Board member since 1992. Thank you both for your service. Well, that concludes our program for this evening. NCRC members, remember the breakfast tomorrow. You can share your stories as well. There will be a breakfast buffet, as John mentioned. So thanks for coming. And we also want to thank Local 25, Local 99, and Local 51, the unions at the hotel. Thank you and have a great evening.